that we're actually connected. Well, hello, everyone. I'm going to just check that Facebook is indeed streaming. It's nice to see everybody. If you've got any questions, you're always welcome to, throw them in the comments below. My daughter bought me a branded drinking cup.
I have one exactly the same, but it's
really?
Darker green that my daughter bought me.
That is wild. My daughter helped me choose the branding colors. Thankfully, she also helps me dress occasionally, which is also useful.
I can relate to that experience as well.
Yeah. I'm really grateful for having kids because they bring things to my life, like, learning how to play chess and various other things. Not that I joyfully do that, but I do that-ish. It's so lovely to have you back here, Stephanie. This morning, I released our conversation on my podcast, Homeschool Mama Self-Care Podcast. We talked about the post-high school mothering phase, which doesn't often get a conversation point in the homeschool world because most people that have graduated homeschooling typically drop off and move into different parts of their lives, understandably. But so we're talking about the post-high school mothering phase. We're talking about how we relate with our kids as they get older and foster their agency and independence. We talk about how you moved into alternative education and even how you chose the alternative education consultant name and why I chose the homeschool life coaching name. We talk about why we think outside the educational box. Transitioning from the homeschool mom role to our next phase of our lives. We definitely talk about how we get an education just by watching our kids learn, learning about child development, learning to organize, including how to, get the kids to things on time, and learning about home education throughout our homeschool lives. We talk about your specific experience of homeschooling in Quebec, which I'd love to hear if you've had further thoughts about that, and how we support our adult kids to choose the next step in their life. And let's talk, like we talked about supporting some of our adolescents moving into school or high school, and also what our thoughts were and what their thoughts are on grades and testing, despite generally being unschooled. And so ultimately, all of this discussion, I noticed, was very much about your tagline, own your life and own your learning, or own your learning to own your life, or as I say it, de-school to live your life on purpose. Yeah. So as I said in the description of this live, it feels like we are definitely meant to connect and meet and work together and support other homeschool families. So that was a very long introduction, but that's what we talked about on the podcast episode. Where would you like to take our conversation today?
Yeah, we touched on many, many, many topics, and I had time to kind of go back and listen to a few bits and pieces of it. And I was really struck by just that sense of that empowering of not only ourselves as parents, but our kids around their education and around their life. To really empower them to realize that it does belong to them, whether they're homeschooling, unschooling, in school, in university, stepping out into the adult world. It all comes back to yourself and how you choose to engage with things and what you choose to make important and what you choose to let go. Yeah. And I think spring here in further eastern Canada, we're definitely in spring now, but we weren't when you and I spoke. And it's a good time to think about that, to reflect on that new growth that is informed by the cocooning time that we've had over the winter. So
yeah. When you say that we are giving this opportunity to our kids, whether they are homeschooled, schooled, unschooled, privately schooled, any kind of schooled, their lives are theirs to live on purpose. And I certainly did not get that in the beginning. Like, I didn't understand that at all. And I think it's kind of a mothering, parenting rite of passage because, I know everyone doesn't have the experience of being pregnant and birthing their own children. But I know from that experience, when they come from you and you are looking after every last need that they have, it always feels like, okay, but I'm supposed to take care of them, and I'm trying to guide them, and I'm trying to keep them alive until they're 5, and then help them live a, really rich life and do meaningful things, which means I'm supposed to do something to them or for them. And gradually, for me, I realized, yes, and also release.
Yes. And that is, I think, one of the most common things that comes up in conversations I have with parents. Often parents whose kids are really struggling in school, they're dealing with anxiety or depression, and it's kind of becoming clear that they need to step aside from school for a longer or shorter period of time. One of the things the parents most commonly feel is, but we have to make sure our child will be okay, that they will be able to go to university, that they'll be able to be independent and happy and healthy. We have to make sure that's our responsibility. And you're right. When when you first hold that baby in your arms, or that very, very young child, your job is to make sure that they're okay. And the sooner we can start listening to them and learning how to help them bring their own experience to the table in that. Because it's like that, the hand game we used to play with kids, right? The more their agency rises and ours can take a step back.
Yeah.
And it's so important to be aware of that as young as possible, which I also wasn't, when I started myself.
But we're here to help you
make sure everything is perfect and it's going to be the best curriculum. And then you start realizing, oh, I can step back and allow space for his initiative and for our collaboration.
Yes.
And that's what carries us into that adult experience and adult relationship with our kids.
What would you say your maybe some strategies to actually do that? Like, how would you do that?
I think one of the most important things is a practice of either self-reflection or a good friend or partner. You need somebody who can catch you, because we all have that experience of like, oh, and I'm worried about this and I'm worried about that, and we start spiraling. I have to make sure, I have to make these decisions, and so when we either have our own practice, which allows us to check in every day and realize, oh yeah, just catch myself there, or somebody else who can say, and I even found it when I was going back over this podcast in preparation for today. I was listening to some of what I was saying, and it was like my own advice was very applicable for an experience I was having over the weekend. I was like,
oh, wild. Yeah.
That's even our own selves in different moments in time, we have clarity that can that can give us the advice we need 24 hours later.
Yeah.
So that, I think, is a key thing to allowing that blossoming of our kids. And I think another one is like having a bit of a mantra, right? What is the question that you can ask yourself? What happens if I step back?
Yeah.
Just have that. It's a phrase that's, even if you're worried or concerned or overly enthusiastic, that you can ask yourself, what happens if I step back? How do I make this more my child's? Or how do I allow it to belong to my child as it already does without me getting in the way?
That's wild that you said that, because I answered the question before you did, because I'm like, what would I say? And I said, step back or step away, observe. So then actually watch them to see, how are they doing things? How are they showing up in their lives? What matters to them? And journal. So of course I'm going to say also, hey, find a coach, or, or like an objective good friend who will tell you what they really see, to be, just like you said, like give a sense of gentle accountability. So that's very interesting and very aligned there, both of us.
Yeah. And it's so true. It's that importance of being in community. Sometimes you are your own community. If you remember that you can be that for yourself. Sometimes it's one friend, a coach, or it's a parenting group. At different times I've run parenting groups, and it's the same thing. It's that sense of like, okay, every week or every month, there's a time to come, and it just allows you to focus. It invites you to focus on moments where you think, oh, I kind of lost the thread there, and I'm not really sure what happened. But then you can bring it back. That's what happened.
Yeah. I was listening to someone else's podcast yesterday, who, like a self-development podcast, a very large podcast. And he was saying that he has a coach, a parenting coach, come in 3 days a month to observe them and help them figure things out. And I'm like, well, that would be a great idea. Not accessible to most of us, but that is a very cool idea to actually, be vulnerable enough to say, okay, I'll leave it in somebody else's hands to actually be an observer. So I thought that was interesting. That was an interesting approach.
It is. And I think, so one of the things that makes me think is it's important not to hand over our sense that we know best
Yes.
as well. Do you know what I'm saying? Like an observer is
Yeah.
reflecting, yes.
Mhm.
And I think it's easy, and it can be easy when you're feeling really vulnerable and you're feeling uncertain, and especially when you're traveling this path of homeschooling or unschooling. It's like everybody else's kids are at school and you're doing something different. It's a type of place to be. So when things aren't going well, it's easy to kind of lose all of our sense of strength and grounding around what we feel and can see to be right, or to be serving our child and our family well in that moment. So yes, I think it's wonderful to have reflections from somebody else, always remembering that we are strong and we are connected and we are doing these things out of our knowledge of our family. To be open to ideas, but not to hand over your power to someone else.
The agency again. When I was writing to share about the year-end review that I do once a year, which is on Thursday, I wrote about me, like I'm always clarifying, what am I really doing and how are people really receiving what I'm doing? And this word, intuition, is the one that you're just speaking to. And that is it's my belief that we are guides to help other homeschool parents tap into their intuition, become more confident and certain in their intuition.
Yeah. Intuition is so important. And there's so many things that get in the way of it. There's so many things that make us question our intuition. Because intuition is, it's great if we can follow absolutely everything that our intuition suggests makes sense to do. But, as you were saying, I live in Quebec. Like a parent might, like my Quebec clients, there might be a parent who's like, well, I know that the right thing to do is just to take 3 years and do no academics until my child wants to do academics. But in Quebec, you can't do that. So your intuition, you have to find ways to kind of still honor that intuition while creatively also continuing to engage with the society that you live in. And that's life, right?
Or maybe your intuition is saying to move to Ontario.
Or BC.
Oh, definitely BC. Or when I first started my homeschool journey, I had this belief, actually before we homeschooled, that we have to move to PEI because, I don't know, Anne of Green Gables? I'm not sure. But I was like, we have to move to PEI, have a little homestead where there's a screen door opening and closing as the kids go in and out. And every day we'll have tea in the garden and we'll do read alouds on the sofa. And anyways, you can also homeschool in BC, Ontario, Quebec, many parts of the world, not all the parts of the world, lots of province, lots of states. But you primarily work, you work around the world, you said. And
I do, absolutely. Yeah. No, I think Quebec is a very special case because of the rules that we live under here. But the work that I do, my Quebec families, I'm still very much coming from my own your learning, own your life perspective. And I help them to see how it's possible to retain that, to hold on to that approach while meeting the requirements of the government. And I also have a huge amount of respect for ACED, which is the Association Québec Éducation Domicile. So that's a parent-run group which represents homeschoolers in Quebec and does a lot of advocacy work. And the volunteers there are so amazing at knowing all the details of the rules. Because sometimes I'll be with a family and I'll be thinking like, I'm not actually sure if you're allowed to do that because I think that law changed last year and there's so many moving pieces. So I'm very grateful to be able to collaborate with ACED for their hands-on, really, really detailed understanding of exactly what's happening. And I absolutely use their services as well as in my own role, which is great.
I
But
want
yeah,
to.
it's wonderful to be able to work with people from different provinces and around the world, because that also helps me to show people in Ontario, like, this is what it would be like if you were in Quebec, or people in Quebec, this is what it would be like to, you know, like, let's just imagine for a moment what you would do if you didn't have those regulations. That's your source of strength. That's your intuition. Now, knowing that, now we can look at and see, okay, you have to do a report. How do you do that report while still feeling whole inside?
Yes. Do you know, okay, so I can share a little bit about why I chose to do homeschooling the way that I did, but I really see that people, even though they don't have the restrictions you do in Quebec, the families that I've seen that enroll or are online learners but identify as homeschoolers. The government doesn't identify them as homeschoolers in BC, but the ones that are online learning or word distributed learning here in BC, they sometimes are afraid to move into the registered homeschooling, which is really hands-off kind of homeschooling here in BC. And when I moved into homeschooling, we were moving from Alberta to BC. I didn't homeschool in Alberta. So all I thought was, I want to, and I didn't say these words, but it really was, own my living or my learning and own my life and do that for my kids too, or deschool my homeschool to live on purpose. Didn't even know what deschool meant at the time. But I was really like, I want freedom. I want to do life my way, all that stuff. And I think that it would serve my kids better. In a nutshell. So then when we moved here, I was like, well, yeah, of course I'd register homeschool. I don't need all the hands in what I'm doing. But I find very few people comparably think like that. Like they're nervous to come out of a school system and move into that freedom-based learning environment for various reasons. And in some ways, I think, knowing this in other areas of my life, when I've been really restricted in some part of my life, my emboldened energy is higher because I'm like, I want that freedom. So in some ways, there might be a benefit to being in that space because there's like no, we want to do it our way.
I agree. And I've said this to clients as well. It's like, at the end of the day, having that portfolio that you have to do, or the learning project, it can give you a degree of confidence.
Mm-hmm.
I think for anyone, it's like, no matter what the leanings of the family are in terms of, are they more schooly, homeschooly, unschooly, I always advocate starting from you as a family. What is your place of well-being? And then doing those requirements. And at the end of the year, like, a family has to submit a portfolio or have a teacher evaluation. I always advocate that the family starts with their own evaluation of their year, their own reflections of the year. How did it go? How did we feel? Like, what did we enjoy, without anybody else's template hanging over them?
Yes.
Just have that, and then go and fill out the template.
Yeah, that's
so
good.
It's always, so the structure is not a bad thing at all. And for some people, it's easily done and it's reassuring. For others, it's like they rail against it, but whatever, you just have to do it. But making it your own is always really, really important. And the other thing that I would say is, you mentioned earlier the word deschooling. And deschooling is an interesting one, right? Because, you know, people come out of the school system and we often say how important it is to deschool, like no expectations, just, and, you know, I think that's really true. And I've seen quite a few situations where there's so much anxiety present around the notion of leaving the school system and what will happen to my education and all my, like, from the child or the teen, like, my friends are having to do exams and I don't. Like, sometimes that deschooling process works best if there's still schooling going on.
Yeah.
Because already,
actually,
you can be schooling through a different lens. It's like, okay, you know, you can still do that history workbook or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But there's no obligation in the same way. But you can still do it. So you still know that you're seeing those tests and you're doing those chapters and you're getting that content. For some kids, that's really important. And I think I'm glad we had a chance to say that, because I feel like it's not something that I see out there often. Yeah. So people are like, well, I know we're really not supposed to do this, but like, I'm going to feel better if I know they're just still doing math.
Oh, yeah.
And
Let's
that might
even
be,
do it. Yeah, do
yeah,
whatever works.
but be
Um,
flexible with it. Always be flexible with it.
Always be flexible, because our goal isn't to raise a homeschool method or a learning method, it's to raise a child.
Yeah.
And so go back to that intuition. What's going to work right now for you? I certainly see that I didn't know the word even meant anything. I would have railed at it. It would have scared me. Oh no, I don't want to be anti-school. That's not what it says. Actually, deschooling is an anti-school. But if you told me you're going to deschool, I'd be like, no, I'm not a rebel. I'm not I'm not doing it for that purpose. But now I see, no, even as I signed up for homeschooling and I was researching homeschooling, my child went in or was in school, private school, until the end of grade 2. And I was deschooling. I was watching what was happening and noticing that's unnecessary. Oh, it's nice to have that teacher. She's such a delight in my child's life. But still, my child is completely exhausted by the end of the day and is really edgy with everybody at home. And this is only grade 1, or, various things. So it helped me to see things. But I'm still in the deschool mode. And I think I will always be. Yeah, you
I
too.
absolutely. And yeah, like there's, that notion of deschooling is like it's giving yourself permission to question and to step back and
Yeah.
to notice how those things are. And yeah, there's because it has like I love the way you use the word because it broadens the sense of it beyond that. Like,
Mm.
okay, you do school for 3 months or 4 months or whatever, and
Yeah,
then you're
no.
done.
Yeah.
It's that invitation to always be rethinking and
Yeah.
and it might be an active questioning or it's just a noticing.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
yeah, absolutely. I still find myself sometimes it's a question of like I feel like I fell into that like, oh yeah, I don't have to think like that, and other times it's just a real curious like, you see things. I can't even think of an example, but like the way somebody responds and like as an adult in some system, and you're like, oh yeah, that's kind of what school suggests, and here it is, 20 years later, still showing up. What would it be if we were able to shift that a little bit and have a different conversation? How can I
Mhm.
engage with this person so that
Mhm.
our conversation has been deschooled? We've
Mhm.
stepped out of that role.
Yeah. Yeah. Just to go back in our conversation a little bit, there was a moment you were talking about, so the Quebec government requiring certain things from the parents, and before they get that assessment or interaction with those, education overseers, however you call it, they should first assess how did they feel in their year. And that's why I'm always pointing to, okay, let's assess this. Let's reimagine for the next year. So let's review our last year
Yeah.
first. But I found, even though I was really off the charts, like excuse me, I felt confident to do it my way. And I really believed that I could do this, and I didn't have any uncertainty. I sometimes go, wow, I can't believe I didn't, because I meet loads of people that did. But I still wrote things down, and I did it for myself. And it wasn't because I thought someone was going to knock on the door. I later learned when I was working with the advocacy organization in BC that through official channels, that people really weren't going to knock on your door. They didn't have time for that. At least here, they literally said that, and I was like, huh. Very interesting. I was never scared of that, but I still wrote it down, and I find writing things down, what our kids did, or, creating loose ideas of what they did, or specific books and stuff, it gave me confidence. So when you're directing people to, you're looking at, I don't know if you call them portfolios or something, that same kind of thing is very much like infusing confidence in them that my kid's learning.
Absolutely. And sometimes it is writing stuff down in portfolios, and other times it's just a conversation. Because
Yeah.
sometimes the only salient point is, how was your child doing in
Yeah.
November? Oh, our family was in crisis. It was a disaster.
Mhm.
How's it going now? Oh, they smiled like 3 times yesterday. And
Yeah.
that's it. That's all that is important for that year-end review. It's so variable depending on what the situation is.
Yeah.
And that's why having that, that moment in time to participate in something like you're offering, or to have a conversation, or just to be lying in bed and thinking about it.
Yeah.
It's really important. Whatever you need in that moment, it won't be the same for different people, but to just say, oh yeah, how has it changed? Because, especially when you're dealing with when a family has had to make massive educational changes because of the
Mhm.
mental health of a child and the
Yes.
physical and therefore mental health of the whole family, it's really easy to think, well, like, yeah, things are better, but we haven't done any academic work this year. I feel like we just can't keep this up. So to be able to see, no, like the reason that there was no academic work before was this spiraling mental health situation.
Yeah.
And it is moving forward at whatever pace it is, but we are moving in the right direction as a family. And to
Yeah.
start
Yeah.
trusting that, like, that's what we've done this year is we've changed from spiraling down to, crawling up or
Yeah.
gently walking up. And that's what it's all about. And that might be it. And
Yeah.
then from there, you can start to, like, our role can then be to remind them, like, yeah, once things are feeling better, that's when that intrinsic motivation can come out. Or
Mhm.
that's when you can say, hey, what about doing a bit of math? How do you feel about
Mhm.
that? Or what can we work out? But you can't have those conversations while you're in crisis.
Oh, so many thoughts. Like that is so supportive. First of all, I think this is Mental Health Awareness Month. I think it should be every day, but May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and so you often are working with people that are coming from the school system that have a lot of challenges that way. I think obviously we all have those opportunities for addressing mental health challenges, but mental health. And what do I mean by that? I just mean like anything that's influencing your ability to show up in your life. And when we create this family atmosphere or a home learning atmosphere, or really just a home atmosphere where our children can just be themselves, that's step number one to being able to learn. And I am actually case example number one here because I didn't have a healthy family environment. And as soon as I came out of my home or my school environment or my home environment, went into college without trying, my GPA rose dramatically. And it was the safety of my environment. My ability to understand math concepts is still average, but not quite with my son who's in grade 10, grade 11 and loves the stuff. But also my capacity to be present in it and not be running away in fear in my mind is dramatically different from 40 or 30 years ago. Holy cow. 30 years from high school. What happened? When did that happen? Anyway, okay, I'll just keep
It's better
moving.
not to do that math.
I just did math, just so you know.
Yeah, that kind of math is not healthy.
Yeah, thank you for telling me that. That's beautiful. Yeah, that I will not do that again. But
But
my
think of all the years, though, of growth, right? Like
huge
there
growth,
is.
exactly. Thank you for bringing me back. That is exactly my experience. I see my capacity to do various, even the math things, but many different things. And I wasn't able to when I was a child in crisis, essentially internal crisis. But that wasn't my experience. And now I see I have so much capacity. So creating that environment, it like if it wasn't there, putting academic effort or activities into your days, it's like irrelevant and it's not going anywhere inside their brains anyway.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things, the best gifts we can give our kids for their adult life as well, is to understand that, if you're struggling with something, come back to your well-being.
Yeah, exactly.
If work isn't going well or you feel like you just can't, whatever, how are you doing? And can
Yeah.
you take care of that and see that how it impacts the other things? Because
Yes.
and we know that that people can't learn if they're not feeling safe.
Right.
And I think that's one of the challenges of many teachers' experience in schools right now is that they know that, and they're doing their very best to create safe settings.
Yeah.
And there's such a variety of needs and so many things at play in a classroom that that's sometimes what's happening with the kids that I'm working with is the teacher, for everything they tried, simply couldn't create or there simply wasn't a classroom setting that felt safe for that child. For
Yeah.
other children, absolutely. But
Yeah.
for that child, whatever's happening, it's just not. And that's where, helping a child to see that it does make sense to leave this setting for now and find that way back to your own well-being. And then you'll see what settings work for you in the future.
I don't know about you, but I love this work. Like, it is so satisfying. And it wasn't something that I even knew existed before I was mothering, or even as I was mothering. But this transition for me, like, I've got one kiddo still at home, but I've had 3 launch, and that's a phase of life that I don't think people talk about enough, because it is as jolting and requires a certain kind of grieving process and excitement, and like all the wonderful things, like, oh, wow, look at my kids, all of that, all at the same time. Did you have other thoughts after our conversation around those discussions on the podcast?
Yeah, nothing's coming to mind right now. I mean, I think I'm going through it myself in a new way.
Yeah.
So my daughter, who's been at college, so in Quebec we have Cégep, so she's been 2 hours away in Cégep, back and forth quite often, has now made the decision for university she'll be heading further away. So it's about a 6.5, 7 hour drive, and an awkward commute. Like, it's not going to be hopping home for the weekend. And so again, it's that realizing that we're always shifting. In my mind, it was like, okay, she's left home. Like, we've gone through that. We know what it is for her to have her own apartment in a different city and be visiting.
Yeah.
But it feels like a whole new level that, oh, now she's going to be that much further away.
Yeah.
And so
for you,
it's that reminder of, no, I mean, and I think it's a really good decision for her. Like,
yeah,
my own missing her aside, I can see that it's a really good decision. And it's also a reminder that these things aren't static. They don't leave home. And like, a friend of mine said to me, okay, my youngest is about to turn 18. That means I'm done, right? No.
I think I even said it in certain ways when my kids are listening to me, because they work with me here in this space. 2 of them, sometimes 3, work with me in this space. And so they hear the words that I use and the messaging and things that I use. And when I talk about, not being a homeschool mom anymore, I'm not officially, although I really am with homeschool moms all the time. So I feel like I am. And maybe I even am more than I ever have been. But they talk about, or I heard one of them say, Mom, I'm still here. Like, you're still my mom. And I'm like, oh yeah, I know that. But you're way over on the other side of the country. I'm not buying your groceries. I'm not doing your laundry. I'm not managing, kid squabbles, or I'm not all the things that felt like they were just going to last forever. And then they don't. So it's a different kind of mothering.
It is. And it's an amazing opportunity to return to mothering ourselves.
Yes.
Because as you start realizing, like, oh, this responsibility is no longer on me. It's like, there's just that little bit of extra space. And, mostly you just don't notice. When they first go away, it's like all the stuff you used to do for them is replaced by this like constant fear of like the world is going to pull them down, right? But it's that as you have those moments of realization, like, oh, I no longer have that responsibility. And, this version of parenting, it ends at the end of the phone call. Like, you start to realize, okay, so I do maybe have the capacity to go and whatever it is you want to do. Like, I just rejoined a choir, and, to re-mother, to re-become yourself.
Yes.
And I think that's when we can integrate our lives and start stepping into this crone role. You're saying how long it's been since high school, and it's it feels like, oh, I can't believe it's been that long. But at the same time, if we can say, well, wow, like, I remember how I felt back then. I know how I feel now, and there's been a lot of years and a lot of experiences, and remember that in our work and in our lives, we are engaging with people who are in their early 20s or late 20s and stepping into adulthood or work or
Mhm.
parenting or whatever it is for the first time. And with our professional role and outside of our professional role, we are becoming the elders.
Yeah.
And we have to, I believe that we have to acknowledge that. And it's like an intentional declaration almost, because it's so habitual to go through thinking that other people are older and have more experience. We just kind of, it's quite a habitual practice of human beings, I think. And I think it's one of the beauties of a more intentional, like own your learning, own your life kind of approach to
Mhm.
parenting. You can help your kids see, no, like you do have your own knowledge and your own wisdom. You
Mhm.
don't always have to defer to the elder. But now that we are stepping into this place of life of being the elders, it's important to embody that, to inhabit that place. We're still learning, absolutely, all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And we are the elders. We're
It is a
becoming.
very wild experience. And all I have to do is look into the mirror and then know, yeah, yep. It's true, but it also, I actually feel like that now. I mean, I'm in the phase where I'm watching older, like our parents passing or growing older anyways. And seeing also, I hear this a lot and I kind of repel it because I'm like, what does this even mean? But hearing you're wise, and I'm like, I'm wise. What does that mean? I know I don't know a lot of stuff. I know I haven't got everything figured out. Maybe that's wisdom. I don't know. But I actually know this in the deep parts of my soul. And also I know that this is an inevitable, transition since I'm 50 and I'm moving into that decade. And I'm always talking with homeschool parents about what, especially moms, about what you can do to transition towards that independence. Because one day your kids will grow up. It feels hard to believe it, but they will. And so, what do you do before that time comes to actually transition or prepare for it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's very important. And all of those, those moments of reflection and review are where that happens as well, right? It's like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, this year I didn't have to be with them as a guide, an academic guide
Mhm.
quite as much. Hmm. Does that open up the space in my life or my psyche for something else?
Yeah.
It's reflection. It's
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 fun.
being aware of this beautiful life that we live.
Yeah. And it's something also people don't always talk about, and I'm sure this happens in non-home educating families as well, but I have edited a lot of papers in university or in college.
Of
Yeah,
your kids?
of my kids, I
Yeah,
should
yeah.
say.
I do my kids' friends as well. I love
Oh,
it.
wow.
Please
Well
send me
done.
pictures. And it's the teach like, I mean, I love teaching, and
Yeah,
it's the opportunity to teach and to be or to but just to engage, like to be the editor, the collaborator, or teacher if there's a moment. And it's the challenge, like what I've learned is, like, and I think this is representative of many things. Like, it's always important to understand the context. Like, if
yeah,
somebody comes to you and they're like, "This paper's due in 2 weeks. I'm really interested in the subject and I really want to like dig in." That's one thing. If it's 11:52
yeah.
and it's
I was gonna say.
11:59 and they just need you to make sure there's nothing egregious, that's totally another. So always understand what the context is, and it's the same thing when if you have an opportunity to help somebody, or you see that you can help somebody, whether it's your child or somebody else, right?
Yeah,
Can I offer some ideas with this? Would you like my ideas?
yes.
And if not, step back. Be clear on what the context is.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And because there's been times I'm so accustomed to doing content editing, that I've been asked, can you look at this? And it says lab report. And then my son will be like, but can you tell me if this like the research of whatever this physics experiment was, if it makes sense? And I'm like, actually, I can't, cannot help you. Go talk to your dad. That's probably my first thought. I can tell you about grammar. I can tell you about, the way you're laying it out, but no, I cannot.
But you know what? That moment of no, I can't.
Yeah.
How freeing is that? And that's something that is important. It's great for homeschool parents to realize you can have those moments. As like if
Yeah.
your 10-year-old asks you something, you don't have to know the answer. That becomes your role. Is like, how can we find out? Like, do you want to find this out?
Yeah.
Let's find it out. Or let me help you find the person that can explain it to you, because I'm not
Yes.
actually interested and I don't want to know, but I
Yeah.
get that you do.
Yeah, me too. Oh, I love that question. Like, I don't know. Okay, two things that people repeat often is, I don't know if I'm patient enough to homeschool. And I'm like, is that a prerequisite? Because that's a problem. And then the second thing is, but what if there's certain topics that I'm not able to address? And I'm like, yeah, there will be, probably will be. I definitely upper level sciences and maths. I didn't want to go back to that, and I did do it for my sciences degree, but I didn't want to go back to that, and so we'd find other resources for that. And a really engaged, teacher or facilitator is far more effective than mom trying to force her way through something.
Oh yeah, and think of what you're doing for that. Maybe it's a university student who's doing their
Mm.
master's, who you're paying, so they're making some money, or you're working at some kind of an exchange. Maybe they need really good home cooked meal a couple of times a week. So
Yeah.
they're starting to see themselves as being able to support younger learners. Your child is seeing that they don't have to just go to mom or dad, they can, or official teacher. There's all kinds of people in the world who can be
Mhm.
their resource for a
Yes.
lot or a little. It might just be like, let's go find that person that we can ask this one specific question to. Or
Yeah.
maybe it's who can be your resource for this year when you're working on whatever it is, grade 12 chemistry.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. Excellent
Yeah.
point.
And we
Yeah.
need to know that as
Excellent.
adults as well. It's good to remember that.
Yeah.
You don't have to be the expert on everything. You can just hire someone to come in and, like, yeah, sure, you should be able to organize your house. But if you really don't want to go back to that, like you didn't want to go back to high school sciences, it's okay to find somebody that does want to do that.
Exactly.
You can collaborate with other people's skill sets.
And every teacher that's out there doesn't know how to do every single subject area, because that's not how it works in the education system.
Yeah.
So no pressure. You can feel at ease with just you being you with whatever background you've got.
Yeah,
Um, you
absolutely.
know, I want to make sure to address this one repeated question that I have, and I'm kind of throwing you a surprise question, though I'm certain you'll have an answer. That I'm hearing a lot from newer people that are moving into the homeschool realm, and they want to know, where do I go for curriculum or resources, or what should I do about that? Do you have a few thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, it's kind of the same thing, where I think the first thing I want to say is come back to your center. What's
Yeah,
important? What's your goal as a family?
yeah,
Because it might be that you've got grandparents who are going to quiz the kids on grade 3 math, and so for you, part of what's important is that the math curriculum says grade 3 math on it, and it follows the school very closely, and it has tests. That might be something that really informs your choice of curriculum.
hmm
You might be, kind of, for us, I was very drawn by the Waldorf more gentle
hmm
approach. So I was going in and seeking Waldorf stuff that was more flexible. So I think it's coming back to what's really important for you and what you're looking for with it. And then you start putting the questions out there. So amazing resources are like the Canadian Homeschooler,
hmm
Lisa Marie
Yeah.
Fletcher. She has
hmm
so many resources out there.
Yes. Yeah.
Facebook groups are, like, I can't speak highly enough of the brilliant support, information, resources that are in homeschool Facebook groups. Like
Yes.
every flavor of education homeschool related Facebook group, be it neurodivergent homeschooling, unschooling, almost unschooling. Like there's so
Yeah.
much. So if you have a
Yeah.
specific question like that, to me, yes, start your research, but before you do that, pick a few Facebook groups and put the question in there, because
Yeah.
that's going to be
Good
what
ideas.
will inform your research.
hmm
Um, so for my own clients, I keep a running list of curricula that people
hmm
use that I'm aware of, and I make notes about it so I can share that with clients.
Yeah.
And yeah, so there's multiple ways of going about doing it. I'm
Yeah.
trying to think of anything else specific. I've never been somebody who will say like, this curriculum is good, you should do this curriculum.
Yeah.
I'm more than happy to say like, this is a really interesting one for these reasons. This is
Yeah,
interesting for these
exactly.
reasons. And this is where you can go to find more information. Oh, homeschool, any kind of homeschool conference will often have
Yes.
curriculum folks there with samples of the curriculum. You
Yeah.
can also, there's a couple of Facebook groups that sell homeschool curriculum, like for
Yes.
parents to resell it. That's a great way to do it as well.
Yeah.
If you have any kind of homeschool group in your area, you
Mhm.
could suggest, hey, let's do a curriculum day. So while the kids are doing whatever their activity is, everybody bring in all those stacks of curriculum that you bought and didn't wind up using, because that's a big thing. We've all done that.
Yep.
Bring it in. Maybe it's going to be your chance to sell or trade it. But
Yeah.
most importantly, let's let people get their eyes on it. Because I know
Yeah.
I've bought books, and as soon as it arrives, it's like,
Oh,
nah,
yeah,
I didn't think
exactly.
to look at this aspect of it when I was looking at it online, and I know immediately that it's not going to work.
Yeah.
So yeah, share, and it's like we always say in school, right? Like, don't be afraid to ask a question, because if you've got a question, other people do too.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same thing with this kind of situation. If you're putting it out there, like, I've got a kid who's 9 and they love this and this and this, and they hate this and this, thoughts about curriculum.
Yeah.
So many people will have reflections for you, and so many people will read and appreciate those reflections alongside you.
Yes. Very true. Very true. Yeah. The only thing I usually say is just don't buy as much as you think you should, because you will see it 20 years later when you're finished your homeschool journey.
Yeah. Yeah. And if
Now I
you
know.
can, no matter, like, find flexible ways, sorry, I just thought of another thing. So first of all, I was going to say, if you know somebody who's already used that curriculum,
Yes.
or even who is currently using it, can you borrow a chapter
Yes.
just to try a little bit?
Yeah.
And another amazing source of curriculum, especially if you're more like schooly in your approach, or you're wanting to be more schooly for some subjects, is the local neighborhood kids who go to school. They've got all the books, they've got all the workbooks. Often schools will provide kids with workbooks, and they won't wind up doing the whole thing. Or like, I've got
Yeah, of course.
scores of like 8th complete workbooks that my daughter had through school, and we've passed them on to homeschooling families. So they have to be a bit creative for the ones where she's already filled in the answers, but most of the book is empty.
Right.
It's
Interesting.
free, it's amazing.
Yeah, or it might be useful actually for you to, I mean, maybe there's some really cool curriculum inside the schools, but I've noticed that it's a lot of really dated, older textbooky stuff. So it might be useful to look at it just to go, oh, I can do better than that.
Well, and I think it's often very helpful for your child to see, this is what they're doing in school. Yes, I can do this.
Yes, that's
It gives
useful.
them
Yeah.
confidence. If they're feeling like, is it okay that I'm homeschooling? Like, am I going to be well served by this? Then it just helps them to see, yeah, I can do a vocabulary exercise like that with one hand tied behind my back. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes,
It
exactly.
depends so much on your situation.
Yeah, it does, but that's a great way to build confidence. Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to lock that one away in my head. I know this will come up as a conversation point again. Anything about curriculum? I mean, in my Facebook group, the Homeschool Mama Support Group, that's probably 2 out of 4 people will be asking me about curriculum.
Yep.
And I'll be like, whatever you want, you can pretty much make a homeschool on whatever strikes your fancy.
Yeah.
That's simple.
Well, that's where it comes back to, like, what is your goal?
Yes.
Because, for example, like Khan Academy, which is a free online resource, it's amazing. But we started using that for math, I think, when Oliver was, maybe grade 8 or something, level of math. And it was great because it went into a lot of detail. But we realized once we started connecting it back to the Quebec curriculum, that it went in more detail than the Quebec curriculum did. So then, like, he was before the current regulations, so he didn't have to follow anything Quebec, like, from the government. But so that then becomes a decision. It's like, do you want to just go really deeply into this and keep following this subject matter, or do you want to be aligned with the curriculum of wherever you live for whatever reason? So it really keep coming back and realize that it may shift from one year to the next. If you've got a child who's thinking about going to school or going to university, they might suddenly want to become quite aligned with the curriculum because they feel that it's easier that way, or they feel more confident that way.
I have heard that too, and it blew my socks off when one of the kids said she wants to have a lot of history background. And I'm like, So last year you wanted to unschool and then like really just like free flow, whatever. And then all of a sudden it was like, I need to know Canadian history. And I'm like, okay, let's do it. Yeah.
Yeah. And they can do it because they
do it.
decided they want to.
Yes.
And they can look at it. They have the possibility of looking at it and saying, I'm using that curriculum textbook, but I really don't like the way they're talking about residential schools.
Yeah.
And there's your conversation. And your child doesn't have to say the right thing for a test that's based on the book. They truly can get all the knowledge using those materials, but make it their own, integrate it into their understanding of the world, which might shift more quickly than the textbooks can shift. Because schools, of course,
that's the truth.
It's really hard. They've got to have these class sets of books, but things change and it takes time for the new books to come out. And it's a tough situation for schools. There's a lot of on the fly adjustments they have to do for that kind of thing.
And why it's actually easier for us as home educators or alternative learning environments. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, it has been such a pleasure chatting with you, Stephanie. I think we should do this regularly. And if you, okay, yeah, because I mean, I love honing my thoughts in because I'm doing this all the time in my own little funnel. I really love hearing other people's experiences. That's actually why I started podcasting and hearing other people's perspectives on things. And I find it really useful for me. And then I can, say, Stephanie said that ... I do that a lot on podcasts. In fact, our conversation when I shared that we as homeschool parents learn so much about learning and about kids and all these things over the course of our lives. Consider that a degree in a typical university degree is 4 years. And we might be doing homeschooling for, 20 years, which translates into 5 degrees. That actually came from Erin from the Virtual Kitchen Table podcast, another homeschool mom, graduated homeschool mom who is podcasting with other moms in Ontario. And I love communing with everybody, like getting ideas from everybody and mostly supporting people to move into this space and do it confidently.
It's so important. And it's because we live in our little silos and our own realities. And it's just important to be aware of what's out there and to learn from that and to be inspired by that too.
Yeah. Well, I'm inspired. I wish I'd known you way, way back too, but I guess we're homeschooling at the same time.
Retiring homeschool parents.
Retiring does sound old. I'm not sure I can accept that one yet, but although it's true.
It's the youthful retirees, right? Who just go and take on their next challenge and next career. And
not coincidentally, my husband and I are celebrating our 25th in September. And we're doing it by moving into an activity that we always intended that we would do in our older age. And it is traveling around the United States to different cities and, experiencing football and baseball for my husband and, art galleries and dining and things like that for me. And so it's a sign. So yeah, retired homeschool mom. Where can people find you, Stephanie, online?
I have a website. It's stephaniesewell.ca. I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn. And one of these days I might get onto Instagram as well. Yes. Social media is not my forte. And I made myself a promise that I would feel confident about how I'm engaging on LinkedIn and Facebook before adding anything else into the mix. But I'm suspecting that might be never at this point. So, maybe I'll have to go for it.
Well, let me know when you want to, because I'm over there doing Instagram lives every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, typically. And I love seeing it all, except for TikTok. I'm like, and it's not because of the recent thing. It's more like anyway. Yeah, no, I won't be on TikTok. I know that for sure.
Yeah, that's a whole other discussion.
A whole other discussion. Yeah. Also, it was a real pleasure chatting with you again. And for anybody that's looking for, a connection point or learning more about how to be confident in this thing, that's why I'm here, but that's why you're here. So whoever is your vibe is your tribe, I say. And I'm just glad that we're both serving the homeschool community and giving them more confidence. So it's a pleasure to work alongside with you here.
Likewise, Teresa, I'm really glad that we've had a chance to meet and I look forward to the next time.
Yeah. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks for
Take good
being here.
care. Bye bye.
Bye. Bye, everybody.